Okay. This is a book I'm writing called First Contact. And you can probably tell by the name that it's about aliens coming to Earth. First Contact. Um, please tell me what you think or, anything that comes to mind in the comments. I'd love some feedback. Um, you'd be surprised how hard it is to get feedback on something that you spend a lot of time to write. It's weird, but anyway. Um okay. The traveler came from the stars, finally ending its long and near impossible voyage. At first, we only noticed a new prick of light in our telescopes, a star that did not exist on our maps of the night sky. Perhaps we had just witnessed the birth of a new star. Naturally, we were excited to be able to study a star so early after birth. It would be a spectacular data point for the evolution of star systems, so we began to study. First, it had a ridiculous blue shift, meaning it was moving fast and toward us. How odd. But then, when we took the spectrum analysis to see what the young star was made of, well, we expected the usual, a relatively full spectrum with 1 to 5 absorption lines from hydrogen and specks of other elements. What we found was an emission spectrum, completely blank, besides just 7 different thin lines emitted when a certain collection of elements were excited. It couldn't be a star, at least nothing like anything we've ever witnessed. Astronomer, it can't be. Could that be life? A spacefaring alien form coming from the stars to our star system. But how? The stupendous odds against such an event. I didn't even think it was possible. The sheer amount of time it would take to travel between the stars would take generations of people and supplies. How? How would you be certain that people don't go insane or stay loyal to the mission if people are born into that without any choice, when most never able to see their destination in their lifetime? The dangers of interstellar space are vast. Constant radiation. A small rock you hit would strike with the force of nuclear bombs going at such speeds. And the faster you go, the danger increases exponentially. Even dust becomes a problem, and the probability of impacts increases fast. And the radiation gets more and more intensified as you cross more irradiated spaces in less time. Space is vast, and the probability of any civilizations being close enough and old enough to interact is beyond unlikely. It really could be anything. Yet, whatever it is still something we have yet to discover. They certainly must be more advanced than us. I wonder, what could they want? With the new hypothesis, the astrophysicist ran the calculations for an object around the size of a large building rather than a star, and found that if it were to be that bright, It would have to already be in the far reaches of the solar system, beyond the major planets, but far past the Oort cloud, within the realm of the dwarf planets in the Kuiper belt. Though it was not aligned with the plane of the planetary orbits, these approximations would be correct if it was. It must be slowing down, pointing its exhaust towards our sun. The astronomer had been very lucky to catch it at the right moment and angle, because after 1 week it had vanished. With no hard proof and only a couple of other observations of it, there was no good reason to suspect aliens, and worse, no way to gain further information, except they could try to recreate the substance observed through the emission spectrum, but that would take months, if not years, and you first need to receive funding, which was very unlikely to happen. At 8:46, the small craft slowed its orbit, dipping inward until at 8:52 it broke atmosphere. As it landed near a famous bioscience laboratory, it stood 3 stories tall, shaped like an egg, and covered with intricate designs using almost every color of the rainbow. Its landing propulsion was of a new kind of molecule, never before discovered. It did not require an explosive combustion element. It simply pushed down on the atmosphere, almost gracefully. Military jet planes from the nation below and surrounding nations flew by it continually, precariously watching in anticipation of its potential intentions. The new molecule seemed to electrically repel any other of the same molecule with extreme force, pushing up on the craft and in all other directions. It had 1 large thruster and 12 smaller thrusters, pointing inward at the exhaust of the large thruster, pushing the propulsive fuel into a straighter path, and allowing for steering by changing the angle of the little thrusters, which changes the direction of the outward pushing force of the large thruster. Bystanders and scientists alike quickly realized that this new chemical reacted badly to the biology of the surrounding area, as facial orifices began to sting and burn badly, and skin became cracked and intensely itchy. The foliage between it and the ground quickly shriveled, corroding into a dark orange. An evacuation of the area was quickly called, and anywhere 3 kilometers away from the ship was contaminated. Once on the ground, a wall in the side of a small compartment of the ship opened up, and a ramp extended out, leading up into the ship. And it waited, motionless. Day 1. Within the first hour, everyone on the planet with a mobile device was aware that an alien spaceship had landed on planet Earth. The whole world engulfed in panic and awe of the arrivals. The internet was ablaze to the point of being slow across the globe. When the evacuation was called, police forces were called to control and protect the population. Many of those in sightline of the craft, caught in the excitement and cocktail of emotions, were swept into a hysterical frenzy. Some ran away, while many others ran towards, some with cameras and others with guns. Some police forces were stationed before the craft reached the ground, but the small time window meant most were not yet deployed. Within minutes, the surrounding streets became a horrific mass of panicked people, all in an array of different motives. Deployments of police and military aircraft only fed the panic and hysteria, a mix of the fear hiding truth from them, a mix of the fear of the government hiding the truth from them, fear of the aliens, fear of the people, fear of war, fear of being silenced ran rampant. When the biological contaminant took effect, most, including some of the police, believed it was a population control aerosol deployed by the many government aircraft flying overhead. The rest concluded that this was a purposeful act of aggression by the alien visitors. When the rest of police forces and military ground forces reached the area, it had evolved into a mess of blocked roads of fleeing people, stormed police barricades, and fighting mobs. Due to the chaos and the presence of the contaminants, around 362 civilians and public servants died, mostly from gun rights activists, spurred on by the many internet conspiracies and a primal, instinctual urge to wield the power to kill. Some of them entered the vessel. They found a table, weird symbols on the walls, as well as rows of vials and tubes, a variety of different controller-like things, and some round hanging panels. Already 4 people had made it inside and were pointing recording devices at the transparent back wall that domed over the whole ceiling. Through the thick, dark gray and green alien atmosphere, you could easily make out a very unsettling creature watching. The footage from this first encounter was recorded live by these daring college students, oblivious to the chaos brewing behind them. Without a second thought, an armed man entered the vessel, and minutes later opened fire on the glass at the nearest creature. It took only 3 bullets to break the glass, giving the alien only 0.47 seconds to react, striking the alien at least a dozen times before it exhaled a burst of gas, pushing it up quickly and inflated its air sacs that allowed it to float, rise, or sink like a submarine. Two of the original group of natives screamed and fled the ship. One screamed the equivalent of stop, waving their arms and getting in front of the man, while the other ran and tackled the man to the ground. The gun, still firing, shot the woman waving their arms and was dead in minutes. Footage from inside abruptly cuts as the devices bashed against the man's skull, the last frame peering out the airlock doors at the chaos. The no longer sealed walls poured gas into the room with the natives because of the difference in atmospheric pressures. People exiting the craft were promptly shot at by confused police and gung-ho natives. The airlock doors were shut before any more could get in, closing behind the 2 last seen on the floor, with one stabbing the other with a knife. At the end of the whole ordeal, the ship had many bullet marks, with only a few reaching the interior. For each day forward, all else in the world vanished. There was only the arrivals and the commotion surrounding them. The aliens. The aliens. The arrivals came from an ocean/gas planet. In a similar fashion to their landing craft, they used aerosols to propel themselves through the thick atmosphere. They have cavities all along their sides and at the ends of their retractable tentacles. These cavities are filled with light-sensitive cells that act as eyes. They communicate mostly with color-changing skin, swirling patterns and shapes at extremely fast intervals. In youth, they have very little control over their skin, but they eventually learn as they mature. They can communicate to multiple individuals different things based on what side of them they are on. They also draw with colored gas and unintentionally emit different chemical aromas that correlate to different simple emotions. They have a very rich body language that pairs with their color changing abilities, but they are completely deaf. Their sense of smell is incredible because almost everything above their oceans excrete an array of gases to stay afloat or perform other biological processes. In their species, they evolved pheromones to locate, identify each other, and express emotions. However, However, they also evolved to not just track prey via smell, but to smell different actions and directional movement. They have chemical receptor pores, or noses, all over their body that constantly intake air and create the sensation of smell for all the chemicals they intake, with the strength of that smell attributed to the amounts of those chemicals. When an animal is moving through their atmosphere, they do so in a number of different ways. They can expel a propellant gas in the opposite direction of movement. They inflate their air sacs, with particularly light gases present in the air, by inhaling through special pores that filter for the gases that rise from the ocean. They can rapidly deflate their air sacs to fall. They can inhale and exhale in certain directions that make travel easier. They produce plumes to block view or use as decoys. These aliens can detect most of this by detecting the chemical patterns across their body as they sense the direction of the gas was going when it entered the pore. Either the direction or the change in direction of propellant, the sudden drop in a particular gas in a direction. They can detect changes in air density, everything. And this plays a huge role in their writing system and their art. They can make different they can make paints and inks by condensing their emotional pheromones and write with it. And they can use different gases they can dispel from the tips of their tentacles to make temporary 3D symbols that move depending on the gas and how it was used to create more meaning on top of the mix of emotional smells and cultural notions from movement. This form of expression is relatively new compared to how long they've had a rich form of body language and skin color patterns. They also have 4 short and thick finger-like things at the ends of their tentacles. They are less of fingers and more like eyelids that can move. Their world is covered with oceans, broken only by tall mountain ranges and floating glaciers. These enormous cavernous mountains are each an oasis of life, but the thick atmosphere is not barren because of the immense density of their gas giant. Fungal-like forests drift high above, light enough to float on the air like on water. In fact, most of the flora of this world floats on the air or, or is spread in grand reef mosaics along the seafloor. Sky whales float in the middle atmosphere, feeding on the floating microorganisms, and reef backs swim on the surface of the waves, with many photosynthesizing plants and bacteria on their backs that give shares of nutrients to their large, gentle companions. Despite the apparent lack of land, this planet is filled with extensive systems of megaflora that host vast and diverse ecosystems. The history of the aliens. And I have more history to write, but I'll just read what I have so far. Long ago, many millions of years from now, an unknown hunter-gatherer tribe of an ancestor to this species learned how to use their color-changing camouflaging skin to communicate. This civilization begins during an agricultural revolution. Not really one for food, but for shelter. Because this species lived in the megaflora biomes across the world, they learned to cultivate their home plants. They could expand and manipulate how their plants grew to create structures that helped them survive or create tools, much like a very skilled gardener would trim a bush and make it pretty or whatever. They do the same thing, but much more complex and, for functionality and, living space. The arrival. AI voice. Captain, the time has come at last. We have arrived. A long tubular vessel awaits in orbit around one of the moons of the planet Jupiter, finally arriving at its destination after 2,406 years, Earth years. The captain jumps up from his readings regarding the radio signals the crew had been deciphering along the way. We're here? The AI. Yes, this is our destination. The captain thought to himself. I didn't think we'd actually make it. If only the other 3 ships could have been here with us. Computer, what is the state of our storage? Our nutritional stockpile is at 70%, just as calculated. This will be enough for 1.2 years outside of hibernation. More than enough until we can build the greenhouse on foreign soil, completing Project Ambassador. The Voyager's fuel tank is at 11%, far more than is necessary to travel through a star system, which may come in handy if we need to leave the planet. We have lost 9 bodies to hibernation decay. Captain. Well, I suppose it's time to wake up our bodies. This civilization has been able to remove their thinking organs from their bodies and hold them in cranial vats, while preserving the rest of their physical bodies in a synthetically maintained stasis. This allowed them to live through the journey, preserving their knowledge, culture, and experience of the civilization they left, while giving them time to prepare themselves for the civilization they will soon meet. This also means that they can transport themselves alive while using minimal resources and space. It was necessary to keep the brain active due to some biological constraints. Unlike the rest of the body, it needs to be constantly changing and restructuring itself, and if stopped, would be unable to restart itself. Even when unconscious, your neurons don't stop firing. Hibernation decay is a blanket term for the aging-related health problems that can still accumulate while in hibernation. As an organism ages, their biology faces exponentially more difficult health problems. You can stop or prevent some symptoms of aging and lengthen lifespans, but you'll very soon find an even harder problem to solve. In the more fortunate nation states, the average age is about 560 Earth years, or 280 of their years. The only way to live past 600 is to abandon your biological body, which is a whole process. But now, due to the scientific efforts and funding for this mission, they've been able to preserve a body for much longer while it's uninhabited, especially a younger body. These technologies have had a strange impact on their culture, and it has only been a possibility for a few decades when they left. The ship itself was designed, if necessary, to be able to complete the mission without the crew, but the task would be significantly harder to do so. Not that their AIs were not advanced enough, but communication with the native population would be much more difficult without the crew. Their computers would be incompatible with each other, and without living citizens on board, it would be hard to give a sense of trust between them and the natives. On board the ship were 33 of the best scientific minds and adaptive astro-explorers their planet could offer. Each of these volunteers knew what they had signed up for. They would never see their home planet again. Their odds of survival were bleak at best. The travel alone had destroyed the other 3 ships in their convoy, but one of those ships had been able to follow them mostly intact, but the crew had not survived, and the main engines were gone. It would be another blank years until it will arrive because of how long it will take to slow down without the engine. The crew began to undergo the dehibernation process. Their brains had to be safely placed back in their bodies, at the same time restarting dormant biological processes of the body while reconnecting their nerve cords that have been connected by artificial tissues that integrated into the ship's software. This was a dangerous process, and these are very advanced, somewhat experimental tech could easily go wrong if tampered with in any of a myriad of ways along the voyage across the stars. Hibernating bodies can become dependent and unable to resume self-sufficiency after hundreds or thousands of years. Their bodies had been waiting for them in the UAE Embassy shuttle, in the midsection of the Voyager. They have many biological technologies that make up everything that does not need to be a tough alloy or see-through. They use engineered fungi for everything, including the electrical wiring, self-repairing structural elements, control panels, computers, and the onboard AI. Most of their vehicle controls back home simply hook up to their nervous system, and the fungus-like computer network acts like an extension of the body and senses.
They access it through implants on the ends of their tentacles. The AI is technically also a fungus. It is what is called a microbiological brain. Hundreds of thousands of different engineered organic molecules, proteins, complex computing organelles, and adaptive chemical logic gates. It is much more compact, efficient, and dynamic than any naturally evolved brains. They are also people. They must be raised, they mature, and they have a much longer childhood than we do. They have all of our complex emotions with a few extra. They play, form bonds, make art, and fall in love. They have developed a small but very distinct subculture that can be very hard to fully understand at times, due to the fact that we have completely different conscious experiences. These people think incredibly fast and can actively subdivide their brain's processing power among several tasks. Their imagination is as detailed, quick, and powerful as supercomputer simulations. Yet, they still struggle to find themselves and must learn to create their own meaning in life, just like any person. Placeholder name was the lead astrobiologist on board. It was her grandmother who first discovered the chemical signatures of life on the planet Earth. Once we realized that the radio wave blips were not faraway quasars, and the signals had actually been following the location of the pale blue dot, she had dreamed nothing less than to go there. Excitement bubbled up inside her at the knowledge that she had finally arrived at their destination, which was quickly followed by the fear of what she knew was about to happen. The countdown to the operation was dreadful. 3, 2, 1. Then nothing. The synthetic nerves had been detached from her brain, and she had no sensory input whatsoever. Her imagination ran wild with anticipation of such an invasive procedure. And then she felt it. Both sides of her consciousness erupted in pain, in searing pain, as two mechanical arms gingerly gripped both sides with soggy, sponge-like hands. The pain was so surreal, and the lack of any other sensation was enough to shatter the mind. The first time, the trauma was so much she completely forgot who or even what she was for days. She was like a baby, unable to control or understand her new state of being in a digital world. Before the mission, each of our brave explorers got to customize their digital environment and give their disoriented future selves a path to help them find and preserve their identities and all the things they had cherished in their past lives. Even with all the training and mental preparation, no one on board would be left unscathed. But this time, she was ready. As ready as she could be. She's been through this before and remembers it vividly. And in those visceral few moments, she clung to that memory and the knowledge that she would not be lost. Those seconds had felt like hours, but soon enough, it was over, and there was nothing again. nothing but her thoughts. She had pulled through, intact and aware. She drowned in relief as she soothingly glided through her favorite memories, no longer afraid of losing herself or feeling something touching her brain. But she forgot that this wasn't over. A sudden burst of light and excruciating pain that immediately faded into darkness. Even her ability to think completely stopped. Like the feeling right before death, as your consciousness sinks and falls into oblivion. Then another burst. This time she could only feel the screaming nerves of her body. This pain was even worse than anything she had known before. She was colder than her mind could comprehend. Her flesh was as hard as rock, unable to move with thousands of cracks. Her insides felt drained of any fluid, and her internal cavities were compressed and almost flattened. On top of it all, she was suffocating. Jolts of energy designed to refire vital organs were felt in an uncomprehending daze. Gas was quickly pumped into the intake orifices, feeling harsh against the dry tissue as it inflated her internal organs. Blood pounded the inside of her skull, threatening to crack it open. Her whole body felt like it was being stabbed and sliced by thousands of tiny knives. A robotic tube arm injected a chemical that caused the rapid expansion of her lungs and allowed her to breathe again. After multiple breaths, the pounding and stabbing began to slowly fade. The room was finally noticeably warm, and droplets of liquid started to form on the dry, frozen skin. Oh. And then skipping some parts because, you know, if you haven't already told, if you can already tell, there's, you know, gaps between the passages that, you know, they're not, this isn't in order. I mean, kind of is in order, but like not really. You know what I'm saying? There's gaps. It's not all connected. That's, yeah. Okay. The aliens vacuumed the airlock compartment and the communication chamber before opening the door. The unfamiliar air filled the room with a light-colored fog. The instruments in the room seemed to be fuzzy and out of focus, shifting slightly when moving their eyes. Light refracted slightly differently in the different air mediums, unlike what their eyes had evolved to correct. What consistencies of air was clear and see-through was foggy and bending wrong for the other. All of the crew watched from their monitors while a select few waited in the interaction chamber, all eagerly awaiting to meet another intelligent species. And then, skip. Should I? Yeah, I'll read that too, I guess. So I was thinking that the first chapter will be a spectator's view of the first few moments during the contact event. Then we go directly into the life of an alien who eventually grows up to become a scientist and then explorer. And along the way of her childhood, a narrator will explain the history and culture and how this civilization developed, along with an extensive look at alien biology as it affects the story and place, and who this creature is. You will see how hard it was to send living beings to another star, even with incredibly advanced technology. Only one of the 4 ships made it with live crew members, and the journey was long and extremely taxing on the mind, which ultimately goes to show that what goes out isn't likely to be the same thing when it gets there. And then everything that happens on the alien side leading up to the event in the beginning of the story, but much more depth about all the different perspectives, intense moments, and the rest is undecided. Okay. Anyway, languages change all the time just because of culture and how words are made of roots. And when I was trying to think of a name for my main alien character, well, it felt weird to give them a vocal name because they would have to give them a vocal name because, you know, they're deaf and they don't speak. But they would have symbols and names and often come and names often come from meaningful words at some point, and I realized that for a sign language, each detail of the movement has root meanings, and they combine and change to make more meaning, and they would likely be composed of attributes and emotions. Now, they can already easily identify each other by smell. They will always smell. Each individual will always smell the same, except for emotions. Then I was thinking maybe names in their culture are created and change over time. Like maybe in parts of their culture, parts of your name are earned while others are chosen by themselves. This could also be a way of how they communicate about themselves, like they have parts of their name that are purely based on their current mood. So asking who are you or how are you is the same question. This makes their name very versatile and more of a description than a name. Their name is not permanent. It's almost situational. If they are meeting someone new, they will say their more formal name attributes with basic personality and a little bit of mood. If their friend is calling them, they'll probably sign an informal title they gave them that probably hints at a funny story or something, and it can change too. This also means that if you know each other and asks, "How are you?" they put more personal personality attributes and lots of their mood. Their formal name will always be used when someone else talks about them to someone who doesn't really know them. In friendly conversation, they usually have many different nicknames given to them by friends. Unless in a formal setting, there isn't much use for your full name. When in groups, they call each other by the unique parts of their name that aren't part of the names of any of the other people in the group, or they will just use nicknames. So, probably need to word that a little better, but basically, if you're having a little trouble understanding, you know, like, think of, tentacle sign language. There's a lot of, obviously our limbs can't do the things that they can, but each arm can do a lot of different symbols all the way to the end, and each arm can be attributed to this is where this category of symbols is used or whatever, and their name will usually be like the first thing they say when they come in conversation, because it's like, it's who and how are you at the same time. And I explain it a little more, and the other ones, because it's like, it's a very important part of how their like conversations are structured. So I should probably just read that. But yeah, because everyone, like multiple people could have the same, like some of the same words in their name. So if you're, there's a room full of people and you want to talk to this one specific person, you say, which part of their name is unique compared to all of the other people in the room. And you use that. Or a nickname. Anyway. Oh wow, this is already very long. Oh well. Okay. Their name is an integral part of their culture, and it is how they begin their conversations. Their names are not a static, abstract, identifying symbol, but a personal description that changes throughout life and from situation to situation. When they meet each other, they exchange names, depending on how well they know each other and how they want to present themselves. They choose how they would like to be known. It gets more complicated when they know each other well and see each other often. When two friends exchange names, their names will consist mostly of vague moods attributing to either the now or the time between when they saw each other last. And this is the conversation starter. Their name not only describes who and how they are, it can showcase potential conversation topics, giving the recipient a brief idea of what is new and relevant. For most of their history, including some today, believe they are spiritual beings, not separate from the spirit realm, but in it. They think of themselves as they would think of a spirit without a body to pilot, pure emotional energy. And if you think about it, they wear their internal selves on their skin. Even though most of their people are scientifically literate and comfortable with their biology and mortality, they still have a huge cultural sacredness to decay and the cycle of life and living energy. In their realm, spirits don't last forever, but they are not lost either. They are in a constant state of change, just like their internal self and their names. The word names doesn't really translate correctly because their non-nicknames are a statement of what I am. In most of this civilization's cultural history, they define themselves by their internal state of being and sensation. Your physical presence is the manifestation of your conscious energy or will interfering or being interfered by the world's energy. Generally, this species' culture took much longer to make the association that emotions and sensations are things that happen to you, not what you are. As life happens, or their current state of being changes, they see themselves as a fundamentally different thing, even if only a little different. Most people do not take this to heart now, but they used to. Because of this, though, they still only have a very rudimentary linguistic and conceptual ability to counteract these concepts. And it actually didn't really explain it too well. I'm gonna have to add that. But also, they don't have like a separate spirit world and a physical world like we do. We have a physical world and then we have the spirit world. They have one world, and that's, or one realm, and that's the spirit realm. They don't believe they're like a spirit inside a body that, you know, goes somewhere else when they die. They believe they are the spirit, and in a sense, you know, this, you know, thing that they are now is temporary, but they themselves as the spirit, as the, you know, living energy, is not, because, you know, before they were born they were a part of something else. Right, they were another living being, all the things that make them up, and when they died, they, all the things that make them up make different living beings, and they're like, you know, their spirit is a, you know, they're just in a constant state of change. Yeah. Welcome to the world. And Alan is just a placeholder name for the AI. It's just, I don't know, Alan AI. I don't fucking know. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, as you can already tell, Alan as a name obviously doesn't work in their culture, because yeah. Oh, and I didn't say, their writing system is more of hieroglyphics, like ancient Egyptians. You know, because they're not, because our writing system is abstract symbols to represent sounds, but since their language isn't sounds, it's, you know, color and hand motions and symbols, they just kind of draw that. So, you know, what it looks like the symbol for a word is what the word is when you know, say it, you know? Anyway, welcome to the world. Alan was grown into the world on a sample tray in a little dark and damp drawer. At 6 weeks, he began to flower, growing the thinking organs that will eventually branch and connect into a bushy bundle. Now, he's an infant, semi-conscious and learning how to decode his senses and use his body. At 1 year old, he is learning how to talk and gets to play around with the rest of his batch. It is around now that they are put up for adoption. He was a pre-selected candidate out of 16 who were all put in the same starting class. They have free will over what they wish to learn. In fact, their classes, for the most part, are just lectures about the different things there is to learn and how to use the tools at their disposal. The actual studying and learning part is done completely on their own, out of sheer curiosity. When someone adopts, they select them based on their interests and how they have mentally developed so far. They can get some data on big mental events inside the child's brains because they have engineered their biology, but it's no mind reader. It isn't very accurate, even if it was possible to describe how you think in a brief summary. Alan's batch were all biologically modified compared to the to normal AIs to better fit the mission. This is actually illegal for good reasons. People have designed them to be easy to manipulate by rewiring fundamental logic systems they are born with to undermine their free will, like creating a kind of mental prison. But the modifications for this mission, however illegal, were not done with ill intent. These modifications include improved flight control capabilities, lower resource requirements, and a heightened sense of exploration. Alan chose to go on this mission, and so did 6 others. Those who chose to go were adopted by the candidates for the captains of the crews. Joseph chose to go by the candidates for the role of captain of the crew. And there's gonna be like a whole like sub-story section between him and the captain of the crew, because they, after living together and raising him, it's an interesting relationship, right? Because they're kind of brothers, but also the captain's kind of his parent and kind of his friend, and also Alan is, quickly smarter than them, and it's a little hard. It'll be interesting because he's a very interesting character, obviously, but it will take a long to write it because I'm not a supercomputer, but whatever. Oh yeah, and then this is, well, yeah, I'll save that for later. Okay, well, that was that. Oh wow, it's almost already an hour. Okay, well, please comment. I beg for feedback, any feedback whatsoever. I beg you for it. Whoever the hell is watching this, that's what I've got written so far for this book, and once I have sufficient updates, I'll redo this video, and just keep doing that until I either decide not to, or whatever happens. I don't know. But yeah, that was First Contact. I hope you liked my my alien. It's fun to think about, like, separate cultures, like really far out there with other, beings, and a whole different history and a whole different, planet, and I don't know, and super advanced, and whatever. This video is long enough. If you made it this far, holy shit. Good job. And thank you, and damn. Like, damn. This is like an hour long. Good on you, man. You really, it's good. Long form videos or content is good, for your brain. Unlike just, short shit that does nothing, Do you remember anything you learned? Whatever. I'm ranting. Anyway, thank you for watching.